53-year-old Norman Beasley told police he was on his way to deliver a load of sand when he glanced across to check his mirrors as he changed lanes opposite the Big T Roadhouse. As the cabin of his truck passed a stationary semi-trailer parked on the side of the road, his tray clipped the dog trailer, spinning his cabin headlong into the side of the trailer. The impact of the collision threw the dog a full 360 degrees, tearing it from its links and catapulting some of its rocky load 50 metres down the road. Bob Graham says he only just came to a stop when the second truck hit his rig.
Just before I hopped out of the cab. I closed my door back up just before the impact. Otherwise I would have been out the road myself.
The Kenworth cabin and tray was ripped from the chassis and lay in a crumpled mess on the road, incredibly leaving the driver with only a small cut on his forehead. One driver who raced over to help says the injured driver's first comment was, "Big bang, wasn't it?" Fire brigade crews and RTA gangs worked for 7 hours to clear the roadway. Darren Curtis for NBN News. Nathan and Scott are twins and were born on the 16th of May, 11 weeks premature. Their father Paul, an ardent Knights supporter, signed his boys up shortly after they were born.
They're both been registered. 991 is Scott's number and 992 is Nathan's. Because like their old man, they go, I think once they get out of here they'll be at the game each fortnight.
And today a specially knitted set of jumpers and booties crafted by RTN arrived at the Mater Hospital for the boys. The boys are only 42 centimetres long and weigh 1.4 kilos. It's hoped they will be released from the neonatal ward in 6 weeks' time, ready to begin their respective first-grade claims.
I reckon Gary Worth's got a bit of trouble coming up, mate. I'd say about another 16, 17 years' time, these are going to be a couple of the youngest Knights players as well as supporters.
Great.
The department today denied that the women's homes could be a possible source of the disease. But while that's good news for those 3 residents, it also raises a very frightening spectre. The Department of Health now admits it will have to test Newcastle clubs, sporting venues and enclosed shopping centres, as one of these could be the source of the outbreak. A department spokesman would not say which public areas of Newcastle have already been tested, but he did say the third patient, until today only suspected of being a possible carrier of the disease, was now a presumed case of Legionnaires. He said the hospital's hot water system and cooling towers had been cleared of harbouring the disease. Now Newcastle health inspectors have to try and find a common public place all the women visited before 10 days of being admitted to hospital. Dr Owen James, Chief Executive of the Hunter Area Health Board, said he didn't know where tests were being carried out because the Department of Health now has to report directly to Sydney. He said the Minister for Health, Peter Collins, was told of the Legionnaires at Wallsend before he knew of it. He said the condition of all 3 patients was stable today, but they are being monitored closely. He said 2 of the women had different strains of the disease, making one source of infection unlikely.
Empty shops tell the story of one of the city's longest running and most public battles. These buildings were due to be bulldozed to make way for a multi-million-dollar shopping, hotel and business complex, which the council hoped would revolutionise commerce in the CBD. However, many nearby residents were far from happy with the proposal, galvanised to action by the focal point of the developer's plan, a 34-storey tower which would soar above the city. The council agreed and ordered the developer, Queensland-based Bibia, to design a shorter structure. The residents, however, were not appeased, and 2 launched an action in the Land and Environment Court, claiming the council had failed to properly consider parking and traffic implications. That action has been abandoned, however, as the residents now have nothing to fight. The developer has shelved its proposal. Last Tuesday, the council refused to grant Bibia a 3rd extension on its option on the site.
It didn't go ahead in the time frame, and we're not going to sit around while some developer goes through on and on and on, simply holding the site while nothing can happen.
Bibia has refused to give reasons for backing out of the deal, nor would it say whether it would tender other designs for the site. And so, after all the talk, legal battles and expense, Newcastle City Council's grand plan for the civic area has come to this: an impressive model gathering dust in a back room of the Newcastle Administration Building. However, although those who are opposed to high-rise buildings in the city area believe they may have won the day, other battles loom just around the corner. Lord Mayor John McNaughton says he is glad the development is not going ahead, but refuses to rule out other high-rise proposals for the same site.
I've got an open book about the whole thing. That's the purpose of the study, and I'm not going to preempt anything.
The council will now await the recommendations of a study into council-owned properties in the CBD before again calling for tenders. After that, it will probably be at least 2 years before a developer will begin work on the site. Until then, the real losers are the business people who are working hard to stay afloat in a virtual shopping ghost town.
Most people on their way through are going from one block to another because it's so dead there's no shops. They're not looking, to do business.
The water began to rise in Oliver Street around 3 o'clock this afternoon as the drainage system became just too overloaded. One resident says mine subsidence hasn't helped.
It's all the creek sunk, and we've been on to the water board and council for nearly 5 years now.
However, he says there's nothing much he can do.
I'm just going to sit and wait till the water goes down. That's all I can do.
As the water began to lap around some homes, more sandbags were called for, while children looked on amused at all the fuss. The water is nearly a metre deep in some parts and flowing quite quickly, forcing workers to stack the sandbags around fence lines to prevent erosion and hopefully give houses a few extra centimetres before water destroys valuable carpets and furnishings. SES workers are hoping that a storm expected from the southwest does not arrive, giving the waters time to escape and recede. Darren Curtis for Newsnight. Hard economic times are now forcing many families to abandon hopes of affording a house, so they turn to caravans. Seminar organiser Wendy Schiller says the tendency toward caravan parks has caused a squeeze on facilities.
The biggest problem, I think, is that on many parks there's absolutely nowhere where the families can gather as a community. They have maybe a barbecue area, maybe the change blocks that go with the swimming pool, but they really don't have like a community hall or a playground area that has any kind of shelter.
As well, services that homeowners take for granted are simply not available to van owners. Many doctors refuse to make van calls, forcing patients to meet doctors in visitor car parks if they are unable to get to the surgery. Even the simple luxury of hiring a video or installing the phone is often impossible because residents do not have a fixed address. Ms Schiller says the Hunter Caravan project is campaigning to have the conditions improved.
I'm really hoping that that's the case, and I think we couldn't have had a more meaningful change of weather than we've had. I mean, people here all understand how it must feel to be in a 40-foot by 6-foot space with 3 children when it's been raining for days and days and days.
State member for Port Stephens, Bob Martin, chaired the meeting, in which frustrated and angry residents told State Rail exactly what they thought of it.
We can't take any more, excuse me, bullshit anymore.
It's going to bugger your foundations up because a couple of my bricks on the front of my house are starting to crack. Who's going to pay for that SRA on me? I'm on the pension. Most people are.
According to the residents, this is the root of the problem. The giant 81 class locomotives which service the Northern Line all hours of the day. State Rail has hired an acoustics expert to try and ease the problem, looking into issues such as engine types, braking and sound barriers. SRA spokesman Trevor Harvey.
The most obvious thing is the exhaust system. Either we add another muffler to it or we take one off and put a new one on.
Yvonne Butler and her husband Peter live only 150 metres from the railway line. For the Butlers, talk of easing the vibration and noise levels is too late.
I'm sure the trains have caused this damage, the depot coming away from the door jam.
Not unlike other residents in their street, their house is literally cracking up. And the Butlers say they want compensation for their house, which is rapidly losing value. Yvonne says she's been frustrated and suffering from the noise for years. And one night recently...
And I went out the backyard and screamed at the train driver to slow down or stop the noise because it was just too much for us all.
Skillshare is a federal government initiative designed to bring business and the unemployed together. Mr Duncan says the program will concentrate on the needs of the local business community, training the unemployed to suit a particular industry.
Hospitality, office skills development, that sort of thing, and incidentally the opportunity is there for them to be able to provide specialist training if any particular industry is proposing to set up in the Central Coast area. Then the Skillshare projects could develop specially tailored programs to develop skills in the local labour market to assist those businesses establishing here.
He says the projects will receive $500,000 a year funding from the government to ensure that it is not a flash-in-the-pan scheme designed to win votes. The Skillshare course will also amalgamate other projects that previously stood alone and applied for funding from separate levels of government.
We amalgamated 3 pre-existing programs. This government believes in an active labour market development, and we wanted to see long-term unemployed people given the chance to develop their skills so that they could get into the labour market.
A number of Newcastle drivers and cars were among the fleet of ageing vehicles that bashed their way from Bourke to Broome to raise money for the Variety Club of Australia. Today, some of those drivers had the pleasure of seeing how much that money will benefit some special children. These intellectually and physically handicapped students used to have to borrow an old, unreliable bus to get to and from sport. Often they had to miss precious days. The school's principal could see no way to raise the $45,000 needed for their own bus. She wrote to the Variety Club and heard nothing until 3 weeks ago. She was told a Sunshine coach would soon be on its way. The students can now go to sports, camps and school excursions anytime they want and never have to worry about their bus breaking down again.
Ryan was sitting in the living room of her Cessnock Road home on Tuesday night when a car smashed through her brick fence, killing its 2 occupants. Since then it's been revealed that one of the men suffered from AIDS and hepatitis B. Mrs Ryan now fears that visitors who climb through broken glass and debris to her front door could be in danger of contracting hepatitis B. And equally frightening are several soiled protective gloves still lying on the grass verge 3 days later.
There is gloves lying around. We presume that's where they come from, and we don't know what's... When we went to look, they'd just gone, so whether it was dogs or the wind's blowing them into the paddocks, we don't know. It seems to me to be just as bad as what happens on the beaches and all that everybody's concerned about and everybody's upset and kicking up a stink, and I've got it in my front yard.
Mrs. Ryan has been wary of clearing up the mess in the garden, and when she contacted health officials for advice was issued only with a pile of rubber gloves.
The rescuers and that, they are worried for their safety, they are concerned, and they have precautions taken, they have everything provided. Why shouldn't me and my family?
But later this afternoon, a team from the Cessnock Volunteer Rescue Squad took pity on her plight and helped to clear up accident debris, and were given a police escort to the Rutherford Tip, where council has set aside an area for potentially contaminated waste.
Of Cardiff South is the current New South Wales and South Pacific junior champion and will captain the state side to Adelaide for the President's Shield, the under-18 national teams event. Robert Thompson of Windar will join Sharon at the championships, a big honour for both bowlers. They were lucky enough to be coached today by Dana Miller-Mackey, a former United States Open winner and the owner of 5 Australian championships. Dana holds a number of American records, including the highest televised score over 5 games, an incredible 1,232 pins. She has also achieved the bowler's dream of a perfect 300 score in no less than 8 games, and it is possible for a person now to be a total professional.
You can in the women's if you're in, say, the top 5 or 10 at this point, and in another 5 years with the television that we have, then it'll up to another 20, 30, 40 women that can make a living.
Is there much difference between the standards here and the United States?
I think there's a big difference in that we have the ability to get so much more knowledge through magazines, through publications, and through the number of bowlers in the States. You know, we have 240 million people compared to, 17 million people here. So that's the only difference, but it's coming in Australia.
For Sharon and Robert to have this level of coaching available to them is a real boost to their careers.
It's great. She is a very good professional over in America, and it does good to have her over here to help us.
She knows a lot more techniques than most of the coaches in Australia do because she's had so much experience over in America bowling.
Wambo is one of the dozen or so hunter mines which are very little to look at from the air, the vast bulk of their operations hidden below the surface. As the coal seams close to ground level are exhausted and open cuts become less efficient, the emphasis on underground mining is growing. Bringing to the light of day what has lain hidden for tens of thousands of years is difficult, dirty and at times dangerous work. The 350 Wambo workers therefore asked the Minister making decisions about their future to experience those problems firsthand. Mr Caravan, however, had difficulties of his own just getting underground.
Anyone here? We've got to go. No, it's not enough. We'll go look for another one and we'll find them. Oh, they take a bigger belt, Bobby. Hey? Bigger belt. Bigger belt.
A quick piece of mine improvisation, however, soon circumvented the ministerial delay and the party headed underground. Mr Caravan has in fact inspected a number of mines in Queensland and New South Wales in the past few months. He denies his high profile is an attempt to win back the hearts of miners and is disenchanted with the Labor Party. However, when questioned, has a ready list of incentives to attract the coal workers.
I think it's essential that the miners' unions are on the Coal Marketing Technology Council where we're developing export strategies. I think it's very important that the coal mining unions are involved with what was the ACCC, the Australian Coal Consultative Council, particularly as we look at new mines developing or existing mines getting incremental tonnages on stream.
Today's conference was a chance to discuss the latest developments in occupational health and rehabilitation in the Hunter and brought together representatives from industry, commerce, health and welfare agencies. Organisers claimed it had two key objectives: to review the effectiveness of legislation preventing illness and injury in the workplace, and to see how the hunter was adapting to recent changes. Keynote speaker today was Dr. Ted Emmett, the Chief Executive Officer of WorkSafe Australia, a group involved in lifting safety standards in the nation's workplaces. And in that role, he said he'd noticed attention was being centred on the hunter time and time again.
There is a very large problem with injuries due to mechanical equipment and other injuries, and then there's a lot of use of chemicals in the hunter area, and we're concerned that they're used safely. It's not always easy to trace the diseases that things like chemicals cause. We're concerned about the amount of occupational skin disease here, the hearing loss. Appears to be a lot of noise-induced hearing loss.
However, it isn't all grim news for local workers. Dr. Emmett said the region's employers were slowly beginning to come to the party on work-safe issues, and already signs of improvement for them.
I understand there's a lot of efforts going on in the hunter area, yes.
The Redex Around Australia rallies captured the imagination of Australian motoring enthusiasts. Nothing has quite since captured the spirit of adventure that marked those legendary trials. Legionnaires Jack Murray, so called for his habit of blasting his way around the Outback, epitomised that spirit. He died in 1983. In his 1948 Ford Mercury, the Grey Ghost lived on and has hit the highways again. Motoring journalist Max Stahl is using the Hardy Tourer as a promotion vehicle for the inaugural charity event, the Kidney Caper Rally. It will leave Canberra October the 7th and cover 2,600 kilometres from Melbourne, Griffith, Dubbo, Tamworth, Newcastle and Sydney in just 7 days. Max says the Grey Ghost recalls a time when motoring required real stamina.
All right, it's a heavy thing. It hasn't got good suspension. It hasn't got bucket seats. It hasn't even got seat belts. A terrible admission to make, but that's what they had in those days. Started out in 1948 as an ordinary family sedan, and then in 1953 Jack Murray got hold of it, turned it into a trial car, and promptly went out and won the 1954 Redex Round Australia trial, thumping and bumping and crashing and through the dirt and the dust and the bull dust and the rocks, and giving it all sorts of punishment that I'm sure dear old Henry never anticipated.
The Grey Ghost will be one of a fleet of unique cars taking part in the Kidney Caper and will be driven by Legionnaires Jack's son, John Murray. Many of the vehicles will be of similar vintage, but another section will include custom cars, a display of each of the capital cities on the route. Max hopes the Grey Ghost will remind motoring fans of the times when rally drivers were pioneers, racing was an adventure, and Legionnaires Jack was the greatest of them all.
Dubbed the Grey Ghost, driven by a lovable character from Sydney, Jack Murray.